What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to Celio's Network. Today I have a guest with me, Jackson Ford, and we're going to talk about the deck that he has championed, Dragapult Charizard. He played this to Portland. We're going to talk about this deck moving into the NAIC format with Destined Rivals, as well as the NAIC format in general. Hey Jackson, how are you doing today, and would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Thank you for having me. Again, my name is Jackson. I'm a player out of Toronto, Ontario. Recently been playing a lot of Charizard, as you mentioned. It's been 6 day twos with Charizard this season, so
Nice.
looking to kind of carry forward that momentum into NAIC.
Awesome. So let's start with Portland, which was the regional that just happened. It's the last pre-NAIC format other than the Bologna SPE that'll be happening the day after we're talking right now. So you played Dragapult Charizard to Portland, got top 16 with it, and we'll have that up on the screen here. So what factors went into choosing this deck for Portland for you?
Yeah, it's a great question. So obviously there's a little bit of bias there. Been playing Charizard a lot, so definitely wanted to kind of stay with something that I know. But I had played Dragapult Charizard to the two regionals before that as well, Atlanta and Milwaukee. I had 2 day twos there. One was a 64, the other was a 256, so not too hot there. But going into Portland, the main thing for me was like comfort and also taking at least a reasonable Guardy matchup. Gardevoir's won 6 majors or so in the last month. So, right, I mean, if you're losing to Gardevoir right now, you're making a mistake. So I wanted to play, a deck that had a reasonable Guardy matchup. There's not too many decks in the format that do that outside of like Goldango or like really teched out decks like Roaring Moon. So I wanted to play a deck, with some inherent good qualities. Of course, like the Dragapult engine is still very strong, and Fair Stamp Badoo very strong. But taking that good Guardy matchup is pivotal. I think it'll continue being pivotal, and the comfort factors and added bonus. Just been playing the deck for a while.
Absolutely. So, how long have you been playing competitively, Jackson?
Yeah, I've been playing competitively like on and off for 14 years. So started in 2010. Yeah, 2010, 2011. My first regional was black and white format. So I played like Magnezone, Emboar.
Cool. So that was a question I wanted to ask for the audience, because you're saying, I'm sticking with this deck because of comfort for part of the reason why. And some players get stuck in thinking, well, I don't want to just be comfortable, I want to play a good deck. And some people might think that, oh, well, yeah, if you're newer and you don't have as much experience, maybe you stick to a comfort deck. But Jackson, you're a world's competitor, been playing for 14 years, many day twos and respectable placements to your name. And yet you still say, hey, I know Gardevoir is the best deck. I know Gardevoir is the deck that's poised to win events at this point statistically, but I'm still going to go with Dragapult Charizard. So I thought that was something interesting, and maybe you could elaborate on how you've learned that. Have there been times where you hopped off of a comfortable deck to play something that looked shiny and new? Have you hopped off of a comfortable deck to play like a hard counter? Tell me some of the lessons that you've learned along the way that helped you hone in to say, I'm going to play the deck that I know.
Yeah. I mean, everyone's going to struggle with deck decisions here and there. I've struggled with them myself. I've even struggled with them this season. I made a pretty bad decision to switch off of Miraidon for EUIC. It was the deck that I was practicing for pretty much the entire format, and I switched off of it last second to Lost Box, which was like another deck that I had played for, 3-4 regionals. But definitely sticking with the comfort pick. I feel like if you want to play as close to 100% of the capacity of a deck, that's should be your number one goal, not necessarily like how well a deck is positioned. I mean, there's going to be some exceptions, right? The Trapicos Bouffalon deck, I know that's one you've been playing a lot at the start of this format. Obviously, you can't play that deck in a format of Dragapult and Gardevoir. Unfortunately, I actually love that deck, but
right. Yeah, I was listening to you on the Beach Court podcast this morning. And you talked about that, the Terrapagos Bouffalon. And yeah, that was one I liked at the very beginning of the format. I wasn't going to any majors myself in this fresh post rotation, so I took that to an online tournament right at the beginning of the format. And that was a weird one because I think maybe if I hadn't played it to that tournament, maybe if some other people hadn't made a little bit of noise with it, then it could have stayed a good pick a little bit longer, perhaps. But yeah, cool. So at Portland, you did end up hitting 4 Gardevoir decks. I have the Limitless Labs up right now. Yes. And that was a driving factor to playing Dragapult Charizard. You did go 3-1. So talk about how the loss occurred there to Gardevoir.
Right. So yeah, I mean, I'll preface it by saying that this was Piper who finished top 8, I believe.
Yep.
So Piper, I mean, very, very strong player, especially relative to the other Gardevoirs that I hit. So always going to be, tougher when you're playing against a very, very high quality Gardevoir player. They will often find lines that sometimes you didn't even know existed.
Yes.
There's like one game where Piper just like got a bravery charm on a Clefairy and attacked my Charizard before she took any prizes. So I almost lost immediately because I didn't have a boss that turn to go around the Clefairy. So kind of like sneaky stuff like that can come up, but also just like the Evo Guardy build, it's a substantially better build into all the Dragapult decks than the Brent Tonneson 60 that's been wildly played. But of course the TM Evo is a very, very strong factor. One of the games Piper like Evo'd into 2 Curlias. And then made 2 Gardevoirs in the following turn. I think that actually happened on stream the round after against Grant as well, where she just had like 2 Gardevoirs set up pretty much immediately. And honestly, no matter what deck you're playing in the format, if you're staring down 2 Gardevoirs on turn 2, you're not winning. Like, if I'm being honest, like no amount of Charizards is really going to save you from that.
Yeah, I mean, the best,
incredibly powerful.
The best shot you have is a big dark Pokemon, right? Like Charizard or Marnie's Grimmsnarl. Like those are the kind of like anything else, it's game over if you're staring down 2 Gardevoirs essentially. But at least if you have a darkness type Pokemon, you have a shot.
Yeah, so I mean, definitely just like the Evo version of the deck, very, very strong. Piper, fantastic player. I definitely exploited that line with the Clefairy in one of our games. Even the game that I won, it was very actually close to me losing. Piper just needed to find like, I think her last night stretcher off an Iono and then get back to Clefairy. So all of the games were quite close. Just let that one, a little bit slip away from me. Just played very, very fantastic overall. And, sometimes you don't find the boss when you need to. That's actually one thing that I wish I'd played was 3 copies of boss because against Gardevoir, a lot of what you're looking for is boss KO Gardevoir because you need to stay on like your prize map. And if you're burning darknessing or phantom diving for 1 prize, then oftentimes you're just going to lose the trade as a result.
For sure. And then one other matchup we'll look at here from Portland was I think looking at the losses are interesting because I always say we learn more from our losses than we do from our wins, partially because of bias. When we win a match, we'll think, oh, I must have done things right because I won, and if we lose, we'll look for those things that we did wrong. So your other loss was against Joltik Box. So as somebody, I've played some Draga Zard on ladder. I've played against it more than I have with it. Is that a bad matchup, or is it a close matchup, or did something go wrong in that match specifically?
Yeah. So it's actually funny that you said that. I think I was evaluating more that I could have played better my wins than my losses. This one against the Joltik was a complete nightmare. I think I got 1 stage 2 in 2 games, and I got 2 Dracloaks in 2 games. There's 2 different instances where my turn 2 was like 0 Dracloaks in play, and I couldn't make Candy Zard either. So I mean, Joltik Box is a very, very punishing deck. You have to stay on pace because if an Iron Hands takes 4 prize cards, you're almost always losing, no matter what deck you're playing. Right. Outside of maybe Gardevoir, because Gardevoir's broken.
Gardevoir.
But it's definitely one of the tougher ones. If you go second, I think it's very favored because of the TM Evo. You get to actually put 2 Dracloaks in play before they even have a chance to use Joltik. But going first, it can be very scary because, you're almost always going down 2 prize cards and a lot of times going down 4 prize cards because you don't have a great way to one-shot Iron Hands. Like, Charizard's good, but the second that they put a Bravery Charm on Iron Hands, it's very, very difficult to deal with. And using Charizard is inherently pretty dangerous because of Galvantula. And then, of course, with the rise in Marnie's Grimmsnarl, a lot of people are going to opt to put the Iron Leaves back into their deck, which means that they will also have that splashable option for the Charizard. So, typically in this matchup, I'm just looking for like big Phantom Dives. Hopefully I can go Phantom Dive Unfair Stamp. But if I'm lucky enough where they whiff the Bravery Charm on Iron Hands, well, then I'm going to try to knock out the Iron Hands with the Charizard. But yeah, that one right there wasn't really able to put the pieces together. I think that set was over in like 15 minutes or something. It was not a very long set.
So one more question about your Portland list, and then we're going to start looking ahead. Did you ever wish you had a second TM Evo, a fourth Arven, or a Cleffa? Those are some cards that boost consistency that I have seen in some lists, noting that your list played 3 Arven, 1 Evo, and 2 Badoo, no Cleffa.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I mean, I like to build my decks on the more consistent side. If you've ever seen any of my deck building, I'm often including extra consistency cards that are like proactively good. Like I played the Secret Box and Charizard as well. So, I felt like I made enough adjustments where they weren't necessary. Like I had the Brock Scouting, which was included over the Jacques, which I played before. I mean, Brock's is more of a consistency card. Jacques is still a consistency card, but more of a power card.
Yeah.
Just because you're able to grab multiple cloaks. Brock's is nice because I'm getting basics in play. I can get Fez if the opponent takes a 1-prize KO. So with the inclusion of that, I definitely don't think you need the 4th copy of Arven. That being said, into like matchups like that Joltik box that I lost to, if I have a 4th Arven, my odds of finding Candy Charizard increase dramatically, which is actually probably more important than the TM Evo odds. The 4th Arven for the TM Evo odds is also fairly nice. I wouldn't include the 2nd copy of the TM Evo though, because 1 in 10 games you prize it, and sure, you have a tiny bit more of a percentage in terms of just raw drawing into the TM Evo, but you have very reliable Badoo game plans as well. At the end of the day, you're still like a Badoo Unfair Stamp countercatcher deck. But going into the Portland field where Badoo seems a little bit less impactful, we have more decks that are less reliant on items. I could definitely see like the 4th Arven and even potentially a Cleffa going in, but more likely the 4th Cleffa, or sorry, the fourth Arven. The Cleffa, I don't necessarily think you need it, but it is a nice crutch.
Cool, awesome. So going into NAIC, we have Destined Rivals, and we have the Battle decks, which I think those cards are also included in the main set for Destined Rivals. What are the new decks you respect going into NAIC? Now, it doesn't have to just be new cards. It could be new creations or variants that have come out recently as well.
Right. So, I mean, when you talk about new variants, of course, the TM Evo version of Guardy is the number one thing that you should be respecting. Somehow Guardy manages to be disrespected every single tournament and then wins every single tournament. I think anyone that's playing a deck with a bad Gardevoir matchup is very, very silly. So I'm calling out the Flareon, Sylveon players here specifically because that is like the number one deck that's really good for Gardevoir because A, it's really good into Dragapult, and B, it's really bad into Gardevoir. So you essentially just take a bunch of hate and then you push good matchups into Guardy's bracket. So I would be respecting TM Evo Guardy very, very heavily. The other thing that I would be respecting very heavily is Marnie's Grimmsnarl, because that is maybe the one deck in the format that has like a decisively good Gardevoir matchup. I do have like limited testing on it, but I just came from actually playing some games with like Kieran Farah, who's pretty high on the Grimmsnarl deck, and it seemed very, very convincing in that matchup. There's a lot of opportunities for Grimmsnarl to essentially take 3 prize turns and win on the spot, especially if players overload their Drifloon or Screamtail. And then one of the things that you can also just do is bench Shaman, and then you take away those Screamtail lines. So Marnie's Grimmsnarl and TM Evo Guardy are the number 1 and 2 things that I would be worrying about going into NAIC.
And then let's say, you're not playing one of those 2 decks and you're preparing to play against them. Are you expecting every Guardy in the room to cut 1/1 Rabsca for a Shaman plus another card? And if they do that, are you expecting them to go lighter on the Evos as well? What are you expecting about that for Guardy?
Right, and that's a great question. So, I mean, people don't inherently like Rabsca very much as a card. Something that I think people underestimate is just how much people like to play certain things. Like, we've seen decks like Roaring Moon in the Paradox Rift format, where that deck had maybe one good matchup in the entire room, but it had, 15-16% of the meta. So people don't inherently like Rabsca because it's inconsistent, it's clunky, it gets prized. So I think a lot of people will cut the Rabsca for the Shaman. Shaman's also just a very powerful card. We've seen it multiple times before with Manaphy, Mr. Mime, things like that. So I do think people will make that adjustment. I also think that people will still continue to play Badoo. So I know some people are talking about playing like Charizard Pidgeot or like these more item reliant decks because Guardy's cutting Badoo. I don't think Guardy's cutting Badoo. I think that they will have it in like the majority of Gardevoir lists. And I wouldn't expect to see too many changes elsewhere. I mean, Henry Chow might come up with a new variant of Guardy for like the 7th time.
Right.
But for the general population, I would expect to see, you know, more things along the TM Evo Guardy and, you know, some stragglers sticking with the Brent Guardy as well.
Cool. And then Marnie's Grimmsnarl, any kind of insight on bad ways to build it, good ways to build it, mistakes that people might be making with the deck?
Yeah, so I mean, I've played a week with the deck, so I don't have more than like 30 games with the deck. But the preliminary results from me show that like anyone that's playing an A-Spec other than Secret Box is making a huge mistake. I know that that's the A-Spec most people have been playing, but people like Unfair Stamp, and you know, Frost Monkey Dory has played Unfair Stamp. I still think Secret Box is a fantastic A-Spec. It's the only deck that can Secret Box for a Stage 2 and a Rare Candy. The Spikemouth Gym is just incredibly strong. Being able to consistently get turn 2 Grimmsnarl is very, very oppressive. I had like 2 games today where I was playing Dragapult, and then I ended up with 2 Draclics being KO'd on like turn 3. The deck is just very, very consistent. It's very good at getting the board wipes. The one thing that I think is, you know, potentially a mistake is that when people like allow themselves to get too far ahead and then get Iono'd or Unfair Stamped. So rather than like a deck building decision, more like a play style thing, is like you do need to be careful about when you're being aggressive and when you are being a little bit more reserved. Because if you get too far ahead, Unfair Stamp and Iono are very powerful cards because Grimmsnarl doesn't have an inherent draw engine consistency. So I guess from a deck building perspective, you know, max out your copies of Iono and Research, and you give yourself at least good odds to draw out of any disruption.
Great. Next question. How does the format or the meta change with Destined Rivals? Are there actually shifts and jumps? Like we saw Japan in Champions League Aichi in May have some pretty big differences. Not only the 4 Marnie's Grimmsnarl decks in top 16, but also 3 out of 4 of top 4 being Charizard EX variants of some sort, a spread of a Draga Zard, a Draga Zard, a Zard Pidgeot, and a Zard Owl. Are these meta shifts real? Why or why not? And are other things happening as well?
Yeah, so I mean, I think you'll see like a little bit of an increase in Charizard just due to Gardevoir being very strong. Charizard has never really completely fallen off. Even in Prismatic and the current format, we've still seen like 3 to 4% Charizard despite it having very bad matchups across almost all of the top decks. But I do think you'll still consistently see a little bit of Charizard. The rest of the meta, I think, will stay, you know, relatively consistent. You're going to see a little bit of a drop off in those Terra decks just due to the new Rockets. What is it? Rockets.
I think it's Skywatch Tower or something.
Skywatch Tower, yeah, the Watchtower. That card is, you know, pretty bad for the Terra decks. Not necessarily, you know, unbeatable. But if even like, let's say 20% of the room has one of those cards in it, I would be kind of scared off of a Terra deck because some games my opponent just could open it turn 1 and a playable hand turns into a dead hand. So I think that you'll see a little bit less meta share in those Terra decks, and you'll see a little bit more concentration among, you know, the Dragapult, the Guardy, and the Grimmsnarl. I think that's typically what we've been, you know, trending towards anyways. We've started with a pretty wide format, and then we've gotten to day 2s where we've had like 20% Dragapult, 20% Guardy, and 20% Raging Bolt. So I think you'll see something pretty similar with the Grimmsnarl. Maybe not 20%, but, you know, reaching that pretty high concentration.
Yeah, centralizing around a few decks. So going into NAIC, does Dragapult Charizard get better, worse, or stay the same? Why would you play it? Why would you not play it?
Yeah, so I think it's about the same. You might get a little bit of a jump just due to less people playing Dragapult. So, I mean, the Dragapult mirror, if you play against straight Dragapult, is slightly unfavored. I would say maybe like 45-55 to 40-60, depending on, you know, what your opponent's list is. That's a matchup which is going to go down at least a little bit, but you're also going to see the rise of Marnie's Grimmsnarl, which very similarly is probably around 40-60 as well. So I think it stays a little bit, I'd say it's about the same, but maybe like a tiny bit worse. I think like the main reasons to play the deck is, again, I mentioned earlier, but the Gardevoir matchup. If you want to play a Dragapult deck that doesn't just like immediately lose to a TM Evo into 2 Curlias a lot of the time, I think that this is one of the only decks that actually survives. I also think that the deck is, you know, a little bit easier in some aspects, but also harder in some aspects. So like if you're not as experienced of a Dragapult player, sometimes Charizard can just bail you out in certain matchups. Of course, like Charizard is just kind of like a big beat stick in a lot of ways. You just candy out a Charizard, and sometimes you even have the unfair stamp to go along with it, and that wins you a lot of games, especially into like some of the more like aggressive decks. Like if you play it against a Raging Bolt still, like a lot of times they do just brick off of unfair stamp. The reasons why I wouldn't play it, and similarly where I said it was easy, it's also harder in some aspects. It also has challenges with bench management that other versions of Dragapult have less so. You're actually just trying to manage two different evolutions. Sometimes you want to have, two Charmanders on your bench so one can make it into a Charizard, but sometimes you don't want to have that second Charmander because it's a free prize card or even a countercatcher target. I've gotten into a lot of trouble in Gardevoir games where my opponent countercatchers my second Charmander and starts screamtailing around it. And that's definitely like an issue where if you're not like A1 on your bench management in like the Gardevoir, Dragapult, and now Grimmsnarl matchup, you can definitely get punished. So the bench management is a little bit easier if you were to play Dragapult Dusknoir or straight Dragapult.
Would you consider Shaman or Rabska in Dragapult Charizard?
So Rabska is a card that people have been playing, and I'm not a huge fan of it. So one of the reasons that you play Rabska is for the Dragapult mirror. You shut off the 6 damage counters from Phantom Dive. But the thing that really happens a lot in the Dragapult mirror is one player doesn't get set up and one player does. So like a Rabska is not going to save you from, the 30 to 40% of games where they're just always a blowout.
Yeah.
So playing a card like Rabska doesn't actually give you a huge bump in that specific matchup, and you're actually already sacrificing 2 consistency cards out of your deck to fit it. So if there's like a margin for like boosting up a percentage from playing the Rabska, I don't think it's a very wide one. Things like End Zoroark were a little bit concerning for the deck, so I made the adjustment to play the 100 HP Charmeleon so it would survive End's Darmanitan's attack. That's another reason why you would play a card like Rabska or Shaman. And then speaking a little bit more on Shaman specifically, you don't have a ton of ways to search for it. It's 80 HP bench Pokemon, which means that you can't Buddy Poffin for it. So you're limited to either Ultra Ball, Brock, or Nest Ball or Artisan. But I don't necessarily think I'm going to continue including Artisan going forward because the Stadium card is a little bit too friendly. I think that with like the inclusion of more like powerful Stadium cards in the format, playing like a little bit more of an oppressive Stadium like Jamming Tower or the Rockets Watchtower is a better inclusion there. So if I'm already taking out like one of my ways to find Shaman, it's very limited, and I naturally think that decks like Terrabox, like End Zoroark, will just decrease in play because people are scared off of it. You might have like some people, like I know Liam Halliburton loves End Zoroark, maybe like some players like him just show up with the deck because they love it. But I think like for the consensus, like top 5, top 6 decks, I don't think any of them will include like a huge sniping option outside of like Screamtail or the Baby Raging Bolt.
Yeah, so that's what I was going to ask. How do you decide if Baby Raging Bolt is, or like you said, Baby Raging Bolt and Screamtail, how do you decide if those are a good enough reason to put in Shaman?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously it first starts with your deck, right? Is your deck weak to Raging Bolt or the Baby Raging Bolt? Is your deck weak to Screamtail? There are some matchups where Raging Bolt and Gardevoir, for that matter, don't even use these cards.
Right.
So if it's like a very, very niche scenario, then there's no reason to include these cards. Number 1 is that. Number 2 is, if they are relevant, how relevant are they actually, and how popular are these decks going to be? So in Gardevoir's case, right, we should expect to see a lot of Gardevoir. So, very valid reason to include Shaman if your deck is weak to the Screamtail. In Raging Bolt's case, it's kind of, undetermined. The deck was very popular, but like I said, I think it'll fall off at least a little bit due to the Watchtower. And like if I was playing the Shaman just to beat Raging Bolt, well, I'd rather just play a Watchtower in my deck because it's a little bit more versatile. Bench Snipe I don't think is going to be super, super popular, and I'd rather gain the other points against the other Terra decks or even the random like colorless Pidgeot or something else here and there. So at least for Dragapult Charizard, I don't think it's super relevant, but if you're playing a deck where it's very, very vulnerable to bench sniping, trying to think of one off the top of my head that's like super vulnerable to bench sniping. And Marnie's Grimmsnarl is a good example because if the deck is very vulnerable to like a countercatcher, Iono Screamtail, or even like a Baby Raging Bolt just sniping off your Frostlasses. So I think if I was playing one of those 2 decks, I'd more lean into playing the Baby Shaman, not the Baby Raging Bolt.
Awesome. Okay, well, Jackson, we're going to wrap things up with one final question. Going into NAIC, you know, we're about 2 weeks away right now, but what do you think the 3 most popular decks in top 8 of the Masters division will be?
Okay, that's a great question. I'll give you some numbers to go with it as well. So we came off of NAIC last year with 6 Gardevoirs in top 8. I don't think we're going to match that. I think we're going to have less, but I still am anticipating, let's say 2 or maybe 3. But I'm going to go with 2 on the reserve. So I'm going to say 2 Gardevoirs. I'm going to say 2 Grimmsnarl, and I'm going to say 1 Dragapult. You're going to have some stragglers playing EV box, so I'm not going to devote any more spots because these guys just love playing this deck for some reason. I don't know why, but they love playing this deck, so I'm not going to devote any other spots to Dragapult because I think there will still be a reasonable level of Dragapult hate at the event.
Absolutely. All right, Jackson. Well, thanks so much for being on the channel. Any shout outs you want to give before we head out?
Yeah, again, thank you for having me. I appreciate you bringing me on. Shout outs to my 2 sponsors, Banana Games and Hobby, located in Toronto, Ontario. If you're in the Toronto area, go check them out. It's a fantastic store. Number 2 to Endgame TCG. It's my sleeve sponsor. The sleeves were fantastic. I actually got the chance to use some new ones that are going to be coming out soon in Portland, and they were fantastic, shuffled amazing. So definitely keep an eye out for that. And then, you know, finally, shout out to all the people in Toronto that support me and all the people that hate on Dragapult Charizard, saying that I'm a Charizard one trick.
Thank you so much, Jackson, and good luck at NAIC.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.